The activist left look like ruthless fascists. Why? Because they kind of are. So the New York Times suppressed that. They didn't want you to know. And you should know that. Brit Hume is Fox's senior political analyst, and he joins us tonight. So, Brit, as a piece of journalism, how do you assess this story?
This is a story that should never have gotten anywhere near print. I mean, this remember now, we're talking here about a secondhand account from a witness that the authors did not speak to and who is not speaking. And he is said by friends to be saying this happened, right? So it isn't even a first-hand account. So right there, you got a huge strike against you if you're trying to get the story into print, at least in the old New York Times, right? And then on top of that, you have the fact that the woman herself is not talking, the alleged victim is not talking, and she has told friends that she didn't remember this. So I can only imagine what would have happened back in my newspaper days if I went to an editor and says, this is what I've got. I mean, I can just see him picking up the copy and throwing it across the room, and you couldn't get anywhere near. This is nowhere near publishable. It's not even remotely close.
So they kind of gamely defend themselves by saying, well, the editor did this. Now, and a lot of writers, I'm one of them, you've had a book excerpted in print, right? They take your book and they make a newspaper piece out of it.
Right.
You watch pretty carefully, don't you?
Of course you do. On top of that, remember this. They say, and have been saying in television interviews in recent days, that they believe that these accusers, Deborah Ramirez, you remember her, and this woman that was the alleged victim in this case, that he did abuse them. Right? But they also go on to say that they believe he basically has led an exemplary life, Kavanaugh led an exemplary life since then, and that they think, basically he's a good guy and has been a reputable judge and a man with no history of this sort of stuff. Well, after all we heard about him during those hearings, you would not think that necessarily about him, and you would think that might be the subject of the article that based on, would be a book excerpt.
Yes.
What did they choose, however, to excerpt? Right, they chose to excerpt this second-hand, uncorroborated account.
The flimsiest thing they had
exactly,
is what they went with.
Right, because it was the most damaging and therefore likely to achieve the most cachet among the audience that they're clearly trying to appeal to, and which I would submit they're probably a part of.
Leaving out critically relevant facts, like the fact that this supposed victim didn't remember the assault, is a kind of dishonesty, and it devalues the currency of the paper, which is accuracy. I mean, whatever you think of the Times, it's obviously liberal, but the idea was, well, they get the facts right. What happens if they don't get the facts right?
Well, then I think the reputation begins to decline. I remember when Abe Rosenthal was the legendary, curmudgeonly editor of the Times for many, many long years. I went to see him once about a job. This is years ago, back in the 70s. And he's an eccentric guy, no doubt about it, but he was a very strong editor. And he said to me, when I'm gone, he said, I want it to be said of me, quote, he kept the paper straight. That actually is on his gravestone. And I remember thinking at the time, the New York Times was the straightest newspaper anywhere. It was the Bible. It was the reliable source. When I was covering Reaganomics in the early 80s in Congress, the Washington Post was writing all kinds of editorialized stuff on their news pages about it. The New York Times didn't do that. They played it very straight. They were very fair, always were, right? Well, now I understand what Abe Rosenthal was worried about. The floodgates have been opened, and you get crap like this in the newspaper.
It's the default position of journalists. You've got to push back pretty hard. Brit Hume, great to see you. Thank you for that perspective.